kind of the calm after the storm. Boy, does this feel ever good, getting a good shot of snow. Boy, I never thought I'd say that. But it's the moisture we're after. Nice, heavy, wet snow. It came through. We finally got a bit of moisture. So we will take it. Right now, we're busy with projects in the honey house, maintenance, repair, setup, all those jobs we can't do when we're busy working in the fields. And it's kind of funny, everybody's kind of in the same type of mode, and we're actually busier now than we are when we're actually beekeeping, because we're trying to get all this work done that we have to get done before we get really busy again out in the yards. And we had an MBA meeting this morning. I'm the chair of the MBA, and I only had a 2-hour meeting because I wanted to fit in the business in good time before everybody disappeared on me to get their stuff done. And I could hardly keep them for an hour, hour and a half. They kept dropping off because everybody was super, super busy, even on a day that should be a little bit slack, because we're just trying to get all the prep work done for when beekeeping starts again. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's just the realities of it. The honey house is in a bit of disarray, but it's a working place, so we have to appreciate that it's going to be in disorder while we're trying to bring order. And it looks like Carrie is getting a lot of work done on my boxes. We're going through and we're scraping up all the dead oats. This is the dead oats for the year. So not a whole lot, but job at hand. We scrape up the frames like we do every year. We find the boxes need repair, and that's my station over there, is my box fixing station. And we give them a bit of paint just to freshen things up a little bit. Who knows, maybe I'll get some budget to get some new boxes in too. But until then, we fix up and paint what we got. And we're probably anxious to get back out in the bee yards. Yes. But we are getting done work all the same. April 15th, eh? Kind of resembles October 15th, November 15th in a lot of ways. What I'm doing now is I'm going through and I'm counting my colonies. We were too busy. I didn't have my pen and I didn't write down any notes as we went through. We were working pretty quick. But we have all the patties in, we have all the strips in, we have everything fed up to the point where it should get them until they can fly again. And so I have to go through, and I just want to do a constant assessment of what I actually have so that I can prepare ahead in what I need to do. But this yard's fairly calm. It's only 1 degree out right now. And I'm curious to see what these colonies are doing inside. Right now it would tell me a lot if I can just quickly dig down and take a look at the brood nest to see how the bees have reacted to this cold weather and snow coming through, this delay, this dearth. And what I kind of anticipate is, because I went through and put patties on, and because these bees have established a really ambitious nest right now because of that tremendous pollen flow coming in, I anticipate that these colonies will have maintained all that work they established, and by using this protein above, using that to maintain that work and keep them moving ahead. I'm also anticipating not to see a whole lot more work established, and the queen will be laying, and it'd be interesting to see whether or not those bees are ambitious enough, even through this cold weather, because of that protein, if they are in fact continuing on the development of the nest by taking those eggs into larval state. I'm going to try to provide as least disturbance as I can. These girls have devoured their patty. That was 1.5 pounds of protein, and they have devoured that. So I'm figuring they've consumed it, and I'm figuring they translate it directly into maintaining their brood nest. I'm looking at frame of honey. Boy, we have pollen there. That's freshly stored pollen. That is really good. So they were able to utilize those really good pollen collection days and really bring it into the nest. So what we're looking at here is open syrup still, pollen rimmed with syrup. So I consider the nest to be wet. When there's open syrup like that, freshly stored syrup, then the nest is wet. That's a really good sign. Ah, look at that. So we are into brood. Look at that patch of brood. Absolutely beautiful. Rimmed with mature larvae. Got some young bees walking around. And stops at mature larvae there. Look at that patch of brood. That's going to emerge and this colony is going to advance. Okay, so I'm looking at, boy, it's hard to see down in those cells, but I'm looking at something very favorable. There is young brood, young larvae rimming that brood nest. That is positive. The young brood is the first brood to be cannibalized when they fall into protein stress, because it is the least amount of investment put into. They have the egg, that can be taken up right away without hardly any investment from the colony into it. Then they take the egg into the larval state, and the younger the larvae, the less they've invested into it. As it grows, the more resources they've had to pour into that larvae for it to grow. So they always start at the youngest and they move to the oldest, and they'll stop at the capped brood. Very rarely will they pull back that capped brood, because the capped brood is already almost like a final investment, already locked in. They know what they're getting from that. They just have to maintain the temperature around it while the brood matures and then eventually emerges. So what you want to see as you're assessing any type of nest is a continual progression in your brood nest. When you fall into certain situations like this right here with a snowfall and this prolonged dearth, there is risk that they don't, because they don't have that resource coming in, if they don't have enough stored within the nest or available to them to use, they'll pull back in that brood. So I'm looking at a beautiful, this is a good queen. What is she anyway? She's 2017, so she must be superseded. She must be a younger queen than that. But we have an older brood nest which has been emerging here, young bees coming out. And I'm seeing this full of very young larvae. So she's, in the last few days, has laid the eggs, and the bees are optimistic enough to actually invest to take those eggs into the larval state. And I'm seeing mature open brood surrounding that. There she is. My baby. Yeah, and this side is just fantastic. Just look at this beautiful brood nest. And then rimming outside of that is young larvae rimmed with syrup. See, they still have syrup on hand here. Their stomachs are full. I'm just going to put her back in her place there. Boy, oh boy, another frame of brood. And this is textbook, guys. I mean, we're looking at solid brood pattern, an extremely well laid out nest. We're looking at mature larvae all the way around the outside. Very consistent. I mean, it looks white for me here. And younger as it moves out, rimmed with syrup. So they're just starting to get a little bit worked up with me in here, so I won't take, oh boy, oh boy. I mean, what is going to put me in a good mood today? I have solid brood, I mean textbook all the way through. And we have young larvae all the way out seeing eggs right out touching the honey pretty much. And the same on this side. Again, it's just textbook. Like, this colony is not staggered whatsoever through that cold, snowy weather. Now, this nest is organized textbook. You have your cluster like this, like a big sphere. And when she was initially starting to lay, she started laying nice and tight. But overall, the frame's like this, right? So it's like a sphere of brood managed between all those frames. And as that cluster expanded, or as the ambition of that nest wanted to fully, like, further develop around that brood, they just keep working out in all directions, right? And just expand that cluster size. And they make very efficient use of the all those dynamics within their cluster by just expanding the brood area in all directions like that. So she's not just working on that one frame, she's working on that frame throughout all the frames, all the way around. It's quite amazing. It just boggles my mind how they can organize their nest in such a fashion. My fear was, with this cold weather, that they were going to snap back like this, cluster a little tighter, and I was hoping that that expanded brood nest wasn't going to be compromised because they needed to close up that to be able to keep themselves warm. And by doing that, I was afraid that it was going to pull them either off resources and, you know, put them into a little bit of a starvation state, because they're pulling off their honey or their stored syrup, or pulling them off their stored protein. And all that work they have established in there, I was afraid that they were going to start cannibalizing back, because I wasn't sure if they had enough protein inside to be able to maintain the momentum they did originally started with all that pollen coming in. So what I've seen in this nest is very well organized, very well stocked, had lots of honey on hand, had lots of syrup still on hand, it had lots of pollen on hand, and has been using all that, and has also has been using my protein patties, as you can see with the consumption. So whether or not my protein patties have allowed this colony to continue progressing forward, I'm not sure, because I had all that stored pollen. But what it has done, it has provided with a bit of insurance that if they didn't have that stored pollen, then they could turn to these patties and just kind of execute on that. These patties are put on basically just providing the base nutrients, just to help bridge the demand on protein between periods of dearth. Just get them through, right? So by consuming all the base nutrients here, and by using the pollen that they have on hand inside here, they're able to provide a very well balanced diet. And what I've seen in here is just fantastic. Can't be happier with that. So I think that is a very fair assessment on what's going on within these colonies. It looks like they haven't staggered whatsoever. It looks like they've just carried on momentum. It actually looks like they're taking a continued step forward, even with the conditions outside here, because they have everything they need inside, which has helped maintain that spirit of optimism. So that has really helped my spirit of optimism. Gonna sleep very well tonight, looking at those two nests. Now when the weather breaks and the warmth and the sunshine comes back, these bees will immediately go out, forage on that pollen, nectar, bring it into the nest, and pow. Try to keep up to them.